In this presentation, we try to answer the question: did Muhammad pray in the direction of Jerusalem, before the changing of the Qiblat, and in the direction of Mecca, after the changing of the Qiblat? And now, we recall the issue of the direction of adoration, Qiblat, in the mosques of the first Muslims. Nowadays, we know of 6 mosques that present 2 Qiblas or more. The first one is, of course, the mosques of 2 Qiblas, in Medina. Its Qibla points today to Mecca, and the original Qiblat, in the opposite direction, pointed to Jerusalem. We want to know the accuracy of the pointing to these 2 directions. To know this, we must know the restrictions that the first Muslims were subjected to, and the ways in which they knew the distances and directions. The caravans were walking in the desert at the time of Muhammad, from a water tank to a water tank. They had to be sure to get water when they got to the tank. Note that, according to the prophetic surah, the Battle of Badr happened because Muhammad instructed his army to prevent the Quraysh caravan from reaching the water tank in Badr, while the Quraysh people of the caravan were in absolute need of water. The archaeological remnants show that the water tanks were 200 to 300 kilometers apart, on the road of caravans in the desert of the Arabian Peninsula, which amount to 5 to 10 days of walk. And it was not that easy to tell the way, from one water tank to another. 6 degrees of deviation, with a 10-day walk in error, would lead to an additional whole day to reach the water tank. That error may cause death from thirst. We have the right to be proud of the precise knowledge that the early Muslims and ancient societies had on the subject of geography. They were experts in the orbit of the stars, and their positions over the mountains, and between each other. They would measure the altitude of the sun, and the polar star, by extending their arm, and counting with fingers, and even a quarter or an eighth of a finger. They were measuring distances in steps and counting them in verses of poems. As Dan Gibson mentioned in his book, In the English Language, on the Qibla of the mosques of the first Muslims, they measured the angles with fingers, and they counted 224 fingers in the circle, which is 32 sectors, where the sector was equal to 7 fingers. They knew that the angle between the star of Capella, Alpha Aurigui, and the star of Menkaulanan, Beta Aurigui, is almost equal to a sector, or 7 fingers. According to Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad drove the caravans in the desert, so he was an expert on these measurements. And we know one example of the precision of their measurements, in the case of the 2 Qiblas Mosque in Zila in Somalia. We learn from Wikipedia that it was built in the 7th century AD, and maybe in the time of the exode to Eritrea, before the Hijrah of Muhammad to Medina. Its first Qibla was towards Jerusalem, and its last Qibla was towards Mecca. And the difference between these 2 Qiblas, in Zila, amounts to less than 1 degree, which is less than 2/3 of a finger. Hence, they were measuring with a precision of 1 finger or better. Now, we return to the mosque of 2 Qiblas in Medina. The direction of the Qibla wall to Mecca is pointing towards the Haram, in Mecca, with a precision of 1 finger, and that correlates well with what was said, from this mosque, and from the Haram in Mecca. According to the prophetic surah, the opposite direction was the first Qiblat, and it pointed to Jerusalem. Except that it does not point at all precisely to Jerusalem, and the error amounts to 15 fingers. Point 62. How come that Muhammad, who led caravans, accepted that error? Was he aiming to a direction other than Jerusalem in his first Qiblat? There are 2 other mosques in Medina, built by Muhammad in the first year after Hijrah. That is, before the year of change of the Qiblat, that occurred in the 2nd year after Hijrah. They are the Prophetic Mosque, and the Quba Mosque. For sure, in these 2 mosques, the wall facing the wall of the Qibla should point to Jerusalem. It appears that those 2 do not point to Jerusalem either, in their first Qiblat, and that their actual Qiblas do not point to Mecca either. The error in the direction of Mecca is of 2 fingers and 4 fingers, respectively. Those are big errors, that are not understandable when they come from somebody who was among the expert leaders of caravans. Except if he was aiming at another direction than the one we suppose. Which is, maybe he did not aim to Jerusalem, nor Mecca. For example, the prophetic mosque might be aiming, with a precision of half a finger, to the port of Massawa, in Eritrea, where it is said that the companions of Muhammad built the first mosque. The Quba mosque might be aiming, with a precision of a quarter of a finger, to the port of Abu Shauk, near Al-Qatan al-Shabiyat, which may have been a return port from the exode to Eritrea. There are other mosques in Medina in which Muhammad prayed, according to Ibn Ishaq. For example, the Mosque of Uhud or Al-Fayza. We measure that it points, with a precision of a quarter of a finger, to Iri Island, where the first exode to Eritrea is said to have landed. And the error in this mosque towards Mecca amounts to 8 fingers. Al-Fatha Mosque, Al-Rabi Mosque, Umar bin al-Khattab Mosque and Fatima al-Zahra Mosque all appear to us indicating that same direction, with a precision of half a finger. And the error towards Mecca amounts to 8 fingers. And Salman al-Farsi Mosque has an error of 12 fingers towards Mecca, and perhaps points to where landed the boat of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and 50 of his people with him, on the African coast, while they were attempting the exode by sea, from Yemen to Medina. This was mentioned by Mr. Khalid Ali Uwadalamda in his article, in Arabic, on the migration to Abyssinia and the historical role of Eastern Sudan. And Ali bin Abi Talib Mosque points in the same direction as the Quba Mosque. And the Mosque of the Seven Mosques points in the same direction as the Prophetic Mosque. And all these mosques are pointing southwestwards while the direction to Mecca, from Medina, is 2 fingers southeastwards. Now, we look at the direction of the graves, in Al-Baqi al-Gharqad. We note that the graves of the wives of Muhammad, and the tomb of Ibrahim bin Muhammad, are in the same direction as the Prophetic Mosque, which is a 2 fingers mistake towards Mecca. The graves of the paternal aunts of Muhammad point further to the west, with a mistake of 8 fingers towards Mecca. The graves of the daughters of Muhammad point a lot to the east, with a mistake of 15 fingers towards Mecca. And the grave of Uthman bin Affan presents a mistake of 12 fingers westwards, which is the same as Salman al-Farsi Mosque. Those directions are parallel to the directions of the mosques we mentioned. Except for the graves of daughters of Muhammad, which point, for example, to the Jabal al-Amud. Point 63. How come the precision of the direction, towards Mecca, in which somebody is buried, has an importance? Point 64. How come that during the Battle of Uhud, and the Battle of the Trench, the prayer of Muhammad was oriented towards the Iri Island, and not towards Mecca? There is another mosque, we learned that Muhammad designed it, the Jahina tribe mosque. Jahina tribe mosque is strange in shape, its minaret points, for example, to Jabal Nahran, and the opposite wall of the Qibla points to Jabal Ibrahim, and a second Qibla wall completes the first wall, and this wall points to the Haram Mosque. It seems to us unnatural that this was its original construction. Point 65. Is it envisionable that Muhammad designed this strange mosque? Is it possible that Muhammad designed it like the prophetic mosque, and that a subsequent leader of our Muslim brothers changed its construction after that? There are some people who pretend that the first Muslims were not knowledgeable in the matter of pointing to directions. But it appears that the directions of adoration of the first Muslims are very accurate, and, also, that they bear a meaning. As appears in the examples of Medina, where 14 of 21 directions point to just 3 harbors, all of which are linked to the exode to Eritrea. Then 2, maybe, are linked to the place of a boat landing of some of the first Muslims, in Sudan. Then 3 other point to mighty mountains, which are Jabal Ibrahim, Jabal Nahran, and Jabal al-Amud. And finally, only 2 point to Mecca, the Qibla towards Mecca of the Qiblatin Mosque, and the second wall of Qibla of the Mosque of Jahina tribe. And there is another important mosque that has an awkward shape. It is the Mabrak Mosque, kneeling of the She Camel Mosque, and its adjoined religious school, madrasa, in Basra. It has 3 qiblas and 3 qibla walls. The first and second wall point to Jabal al-Hajir. They were built in the 1st centuries after Hijra. And the qibla in the first wall was made to point to Masawa. The third wall and his qibla points to Al-Wajh, and, also, the qibla in the second wall was made to point to Al-Wajh. The one who built the third wall is Abu Mansur Kamshatkeen Atabeke, in the 6th century after Hijra. Point 66. How come we find in the 6th century after Hijra, in the case of the madrasa of the Mabrak Mosque, that the Secretary of the State, Abu Mansur Kamshatkeen Atabeke, built a qibla wall and a qibla that pointed to Al-Wajh with a precision of 1 finger, and that had an error of more than 9 fingers towards Mecca? And there are other historical mosques that have 2 or 3 qiblas. For example, the Yamama Historical Mosque has 2 qiblas that aim, maybe, to Jabal al-Ward and to Al-Ais. The Umayyad Jurish Mosque has 3 qiblas. If we measure the directions from the entrance to the qiblas, we see them pointing to Rais al-Sheikh Hamid, then Jabal al-Rum, then al-Midas. And the 4th mosque over the Mosque of al-Hajjaj in Wasit has 3 qiblas. If we measure the directions from the entrance to the qiblas, we see them pointing to the Jabal al-Jahir, then Jabal al-Haydab, then Mecca. Then we look at the direction pointed by the wall of Qiblat, in the mosques of the first Muslims. In many cases, they built it in new open spaces and they had an easy opportunity to direct the Qibla wall in the direction of their adoration. We counted 75 mosques that scholars certified they were built before 750 AD, which is 118 years after the death of Muhammad. Our list contains all such mosques that we found listed in the site of Wikipedia, and the site of Islamic Awareness, and the site of the Sacred City. We identified them using the satellite images of Google and Here and Bing, and also diverse archaeological studies published on Internet. For each one of these mosques, we measured the Qibla wall angle. Anybody who wants to review our measurements can upload them from the site, refuteislamwahhabi.com. It appears that those directions can be classified in 3 sets. The first set points at seaports, with a precision of 1 finger, and none of them point at Mecca with a precision of 1 finger. And 14 out of 27 diverge from Mecca by more than 7 fingers, which is a complete sector. The second set points at places of origin of Arab tribes, or important mountains from the chain of Arabic Peninsula mountains, with a precision of 1 finger. Just one mosque point to Mecca with a precision of 1 finger, and it is the Mosque of Al-Abrar, in Sri Lanka. And 16 of 22 diverge from Mecca by more than 7 fingers, which is a complete sector. The third set points at places of Muslim victories, and origins of their land travels in the spread of Islam, or, also, the direction parallel to the chain of mountains of the Arabic Peninsula, and all that, with a precision of 1 finger. Just 2 mosques point to Mecca with a precision of 1 finger. They are the Qiblatain Mosque and the Mash'ar al-Haram. And 15 of 26 diverge from Mecca by more than 7 fingers, which is a complete sector. In total, 45 of 75 historical mosques do not point at all to Mecca. And, also, historical graves do not point to Mecca. The shrine of Imam Ali points to Jabal Harir. The shrine of the Prophet Yunus, before its destruction, was pointing to Jabal Nairan. And the shrine of Abi Waqas, in China, points to Al-Wajh. If we restrict ourselves to the mosques that are labeled Umari or Umayyad, plus the grave of Uthman, plus the grave of Ali and the Mosque of Kufa, none of those Qibla walls point to Mecca with a precision of 1 finger, and 10 of 16 diverge from Mecca by more than 7 fingers, which is a complete sector, and up to 5 sectors in the case of the Mosque of Aliyat. Hence, it appears that the first Muslims were worshipping in mosques, where the direction of the Qibla was pointing to the direction of origin of their travel, and their victories, or towards the big mountains. And, also, in northern Africa, and in the same manner, they worshipped in a direction parallel to the direction of the chain of mountains of the Arabic Peninsula, from north to south. Point 67. How come the food is halal if the lamb was slaughtered in the direction of Mecca, while it appears that most of first Muslims, and even the caliphs, and even Muhammad, on many occasions, and maybe in most occasions, did not worship in the direction of Mecca? From all that, we conclude on the third statement, and we deduce that the sacred mosque was not in Mecca at the time of Muhammad. Point 68. If Muhammad was a prophet sent by Allah, then it is not permissible for anybody to change his words, and what he proclaimed with respect to the direction of adoration of the Muslims. And it is not permissible even for the caliphs after him. Hence, how come the sacred mosque got in another place?